I'm going to do a quick overview of film mixing. Film mixing is usually referred to as re-recording mixing. If you watch the credits at the end of the film, you'll see someone credited as re-recording mixer. That's the person that mixed the film. In simplest terms, it's a process of mixing dialogue, effects, and music and combining them into a... The process can also be called dubbing, and it can also be called mixing. However, re-recording mixing is the official industry term. The process involves not just mixing the levels, but also mixing the frequencies. So equalization becomes an important factor in making sure that all the elements are sitting nicely in a mix. So levels, frequency, and effects, so reverb and delays and other effects are used to arrive at the overall soundtrack to the film. The person doing the mix is called the re-recording mixer. And films are mixed on a dub stage. That's the term for big theater-like mixing rooms where they mix theatrical releases. So whatever you would see at the local multiplex theater will have been mixed in a dub stage. So they're very large, the same scale as a theater, same general proportions. Television, video releases, and streaming shows are usually mixed in a smaller room, something maybe about the size of West Penn 212. Here's what a dub stage looks like. You can see it's about the size of a very big theater, same speaker configurations. The idea is you want to replicate the experience of being in a theater when you do the mix. Another thing about mixing in these rooms is they're all calibrated to the same level. The listening level of this dub stage is calibrated the same as every other dub stage and every other theater in the world, theoretically. So that way the decisions you make as far as what's loud and what's soft and the general dialogue level is going to translate to any other theater that the film's played. So that way the audiences are hearing it the same way the mixers hear it. Large budget productions usually have a head mixer who mixes the dialogue, an effects mixer, and a music mixer. So you have 3 people seated in front of a very large 100+ channel console where they would do the mix. So here's an example. You can see the console and you'll see 3 chairs. That's where the mixers are going to be sitting. Behind that, you'll see the producer's desk, and this is where the producer, director would sit. Sometimes sound editors will sit there in case changes need to be made during the mix. So the music mixer is going to be on the left, head mixer, mixing dialogue is usually in the center, and the effects mixer is to the right. Each of these mixers has their own Pro Tools system that are synced together. The reason why they have individual systems is because track count could get really high on each system, and to be more processor efficient, they split it up into different Pro Tools systems. That way there are no performance issues during the mix. So these 3 systems are synced up and routed through the console where the mixers do the mix. The sound design for a film is going to have hundreds of elements. There's a process called pre-dubbing where elements are pre-mixed to make the final mix easier. Big dub stages are very expensive. This process of pre-mixing happens, which makes that process a little more quicker and efficient. So you have a series of pre-dub sessions. A dialogue pre-dub will have dialogue, ADR, and walla, and sometimes these are all mixed in the same session or series of sessions, or sometimes they're broken out into their own individual sessions. So there'll be a dialogue pre-dub, an ADR pre-dub, walla pre-dub. Same for the effects. Foley will often have its own pre-dub session, hard effects, backgrounds. With the music, you'll have a pre-dub of the source music, so that's any of the music that's taking place in the world of the film, the diegetic music. So that would be music that's playing in a club or on a radio. And then of course the score music, which comes from the composer, and generally the composer is going to have their own mixer that's going to pre-mix the music and deliver it to the dub stage for the final mix. During the re-recording process, usually you'll mix using stems. What stems are the recorded output of the dialogue tracks, effects tracks, and music tracks. So each of these, dialogue, music, and effects, become their own tracks. So the dialogue stem is going to have all the dialogue, the effects stem will include all the effects, and the music stem will include all the music. Then these are combined to make the full mix. And this full mix is how we arrive at the print master. The print master is the final mix that's going to be laid back to the final picture. This is what the audience actually hears. Here's a breakdown in Pro Tools, or just pretty much any mixing signal flow that you would have. You have dialogue tracks, which would include dialogue, voiceover, walla, as well as ADR, and these are combined to a dialogue master. So this, in the case of Pro Tools, would be a stereo auxiliary input that all of the dialogue is sent to and combined onto one fader. So that way you can control all of the dialogue from one fader. Same with the effects. The hard effects, the Foley, the backgrounds are all sent to a Foley master fader. So you can control all the effects from one fader. And then the music tracks, diegetic and score music, are sent to a music master. So you can control all of the music from one master. This makes it a lot easier when you get later in the mixing process. You can make some adjustments just from these masters without having to go into individual tracks. So let's say you want to make an adjustment to the dialogue. The dialogue needs to come up a little bit. Rather than going into individual tracks and nudging them up, you can just take your master and push it up a little bit. So these masters then get combined to a mix track, which would be the stereo, 5.1, whatever your final print master is going to be. Here's an example of what this would look like in Pro Tools. So we have a fairly large session right here. If we take a look at the mixer, you can see here are our dialogue tracks. And if we look at the output to those dialogue tracks, we'll see they're being sent to a dialogue master. You have Foley tracks. These are being sent to the effects master. Effects tracks are being sent to the effects master, and the ambiances or atmospheres also being sent to the effects master. Finally, you have the music tracks, which are being sent to the music master. So here are the three masters. So all of the dialogues are being sent to this master. All of the Foley, effects, and ambience tracks, atmosphere tracks, are being sent to the effects master, and all of the music tracks are being sent to the music master. And then these three master tracks are sent to the mix track, where they're finally combined together, and this becomes our final mix. So a sample mix schedule for a smaller budget independent film would be this. Dialogue would be pre-dubbed for about 4 days. Backgrounds get pre-dubbed for 2 days. Foley, 2 days. Sound effects, 3 days. And then the final mix, 7 days. So these days here all allow us to do the final mix in 7 days. So after the final mix is done, you'll have 1 day of playback and fixes. So you kind of listen through, you do little fixes. And then finally you have the print master day, where you take a very close listen to the overall mix. You make sure the level's good and it's mixed consistently from beginning to end. This is a really important part of the process because this is what the audience gets to see. After the film is print mastered, usually there'll be a foreign M&E day. This is when they record a music and effects mix. That's what M&E stands for. So they'll take the music stem and the effects stem and combine them so that way this can be supplied to a distributor so they can simply record the dialogue in whatever native language where they need to release the film, and you'll be able to reproduce the original mix pretty well in a different language. So some general rules to approach the mixing process. Most cases, narrative films, the dialogue serves as the anchor element. That's the element that all the other elements kind of are built around. So usually what you'll do is you'll do a dialogue pass. You'll mute all the other elements except dialogue, run the dialogue, and do a mix, getting it to the level where you want it to be, where the audience is going to hear it well, it's going to be comprehensible, it'll sit well on top of the mix, and you get it consistent throughout the entire film. Once you do the dialogue pass, this becomes the anchor element, so all the other elements can be built around it. So based on preference, different people mix different ways. The elements are brought in one at a time. The way I work and the way I've seen other people work is usually you'll bring in the backgrounds next. The reason the backgrounds come in next is because that's pretty much how you place where the dialogue is happening. So it's a good way to sort of solidify the dialogue. After you bring in the backgrounds, you can bring in the effects and then the music.